Hello, my name is Ryan Carglitter, and this is my sermon on James 3:13 through 18. Have you ever wondered what wisdom is and how to know it when you see it? I certainly have. It's hard to tell sometimes the difference between being smart or lucky compared to being wise. But let me present my definition of wisdom. Being wise is more than just having knowledge on something or even many things. It's being able to know when to accurately display this knowledge at the right time on a consistent basis. It's important to know that we know what wisdom is because it will affect the way we live and how we interact with others. Whether it's at your job or how you interact with people you don't know and do know. However, knowing what true wisdom looks like can be difficult, since there are several interpretations of what wisdom looks like. One interpretation of wisdom is being considered wise according to the world's standards, which emphasizes glorifying ourselves. Examples of this type of wisdom may include a co-worker cutting corners at work, or when someone sets up another person for failure to get something they desire. Another interpretation of wisdom is being wise according to God's standards, which emphasizes humility and peacefulness. This may lead a person to wonder, are both of these interpretations of wisdom correct? And what is true wisdom? To answer these questions, let's examine these types of wisdom in James 3:13 through 18. Through our examination, we'll learn that wisdom is displayed by our works and attitudes. The world's wisdom is not for our benefit, and the wisdom from heaven is beneficial. I believe that we should know that James 3:13 through 18 shows us true wisdom seeks to build others up and spreads peace, while false wisdom looks to harm others. I'll be reading from the NIV, so please follow along with whatever translation you have, and let's begin. James 3:13 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. The first point I'd like to bring up is that wisdom is displayed by our works and attitudes, and this is found in James 3:13 through 14. Good living and deeds are shown through humility coming from wisdom. Whenever a reference to being wise or having wisdom is made, it always involves some type of visible action. James 3:13 addresses this point by declaring, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom." Although it has been argued that this verse, along with James 3:1, is focused on those in the church with teaching authority, it should be understood to mean every Christian. James's inclusion of every Christian in James 1:5 that must go to God for wisdom supports the understanding of wise and understanding to mean every Christian here. The word for understanding, epistemone, refers to someone who is well trained in a particular skill set that uses this skill set in a useful way. If you're seeking wisdom but aren't sure where to start, I would suggest following James's advice in James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. We must remember that good living and deeds are shown through humility coming through wisdom. Seeing this type of behavior is how we can correctly understand to live a good life. One way we can apply this lesson to our lives is to watch wisdom in action by observing someone you know in your church that you or others consider to be wise based on the criteria presented in this verse. You'll want to watch how they talk, how they act, how their attitude towards others is displayed. Once you see how they show wisdom in their lives, do what they do, but apply it to your life. Since wisdom is displayed by our works and attitudes, good living and deeds are shown through humility coming from wisdom. And seeing this type of behavior is how we can correctly understand to live a good life. What we think about and do shows the true focus of our life through what we find to be important. However, make sure that you're striving to live a life of humility if you're looking for true wisdom, because true wisdom is shown through living in humility. An illustration of living in humility comes from D.L. Moody, who stated that Dr. Bonar once said that he could tell when a Christian was growing. In proportion to his growth in grace, he would elevate his master, talk less of what he himself was doing, and become smaller and smaller in his own esteem, until, like the morning star, he faded away before the rising sun. Living in humility by thinking of others before yourself is what true wisdom looks like, in that true wisdom seeks to build up others and spread peace, while false wisdom looks to harm others. Now that we can recognize what true wisdom looks like, James warns us that bitterness and selfishness must not be shared or oppose the truth in James 3:14, when he states, "But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth." Even though the Greek word for envy, zelos, used here can mean zeal or jealousy in a good way, the context of this word in this verse indicates that it's meant to be understood in a negative way, especially when linked with the Greek word for selfish ambition, erythia. James clearly shows us what wisdom does not look like. Being dissatisfied with what you have and caring only about yourself is not wisdom. We must realize that these negative actions and attitudes are not to be openly expressed. These negative actions and attitudes do not spread unity and joy, but will only cause dissension and hostility towards others, as well as opposing the truth. Even though the Greek word for boast, kataukahumahe, could be argued as describing those who are bragging about their wisdom, or even about truth, it is probably referring to wisdom itself in connection to James's description of the origin of counterfeit wisdom in James 3:15. When we display these types of negative behavior, we show that we are in opposition to the truth that Jesus teaches us in John 15:12. "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you." We must watch our thoughts and actions so that we can reject selfish and envious thoughts and actions, and we must not encourage the expression of these types of attitudes and behaviors as well. When looking at the wisdom that is displayed by our works and attitudes, we see that bitterness and selfishness is not true wisdom because it is harmful and doesn't seek to build others up and spread peace. So it must not be shared or oppose the truth, and these negative actions and attitudes are not to be openly expressed. The old expression, "If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all," is a great way for us to apply this verse to our lives. We should not be selfish and envious of others, but if you're feeling these feelings, keep it to yourself. Being selfish and envious of others is what false wisdom looks like in action, in that it seeks to harm others, unlike true wisdom, which seeks to build up others and spread peace. So let's reject false wisdom by not thinking of ourselves, but let's strive for true wisdom instead through helping others and spreading peace. The second point I'd like to bring up is that the world's wisdom is not for our benefit, and this is found in James 3:15 through 16. Now that we've learned what the display of true wisdom looks like, as well as the types of negative actions and attitudes that shouldn't be displayed, let's examine why the world's wisdom is harmful and needs to be avoided. First, we need to know that this wisdom is not from God, but is from the devil. James tells us in James 3:15 that such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. James's reference of the world's wisdom is not from heaven is contrasted with the good things that come from God in heaven, which are listed in James 1:17 and James 3:17. This wisdom is demonic, which is described by James's use of the Greek word for the activities of demons, daimoinodase here. And the use of the earthly and unspiritual here can be understood contextually to be ungodly as well. We know that this type of wisdom isn't from God, since God will not provide us anything that isn't good and meant to help us, but we know that this type of wisdom is from the devil. From this verse, we know that the wisdom of this world is earthly and unspiritual. It does not glorify God, but it glorifies fallen and sinful humanity. In a perverse version of true wisdom, the world's wisdom is also shown through its sinful actions and attitudes. John tells us in 1 John 2:15 through 17, "Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever." We must avoid doing anything that is ungodly by rejecting the world's wisdom and living instead according to true wisdom. Another way that we can know the world's wisdom is harmful and needs to be avoided is that it brings chaos and wickedness. James 3:16 states, "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." Sinful attitudes and thoughts produce chaos and wickedness everywhere they are seen. Those who look for sin, dwell on sin, and desire sin will produce sinful actions. Although there have been attempts to define a particular thing that James is referring to in evil practice, the context of the phrase seems to be left purposefully open-ended to include any evil thing that comes from this corrupt wisdom. Disorder and every evil practice are the products of living in envy and selfishness. Living in envy and selfishness creates mistrust, conflict, anger, and insecurity in those around you. I'd like to share a personal illustration of the truth from this verse that I've seen in my life. In my former position as a technical recruiter, I worked with a coworker that is a living embodiment of this verse. When she first started working with the company, she antagonized the recruiting team right off the bat. We could tell that she was only interested in helping herself succeed, and that she wasn't interested in helping her teammates or the company succeed. She would work on positions that she wasn't assigned to, which was a problem on some accounts, since we were only allowed a certain number of candidate submittals into the client's online system for these accounts. And if we maxed out on submittals, we couldn't submit other candidates. She would misrepresent what her co-workers had told her regarding submitting candidates to clients or other company policies and procedures. She would sometimes show envy at the success of her co-workers, as well as acting that she was better than all the other recruiters she worked with. To help her realize that her behavior was incorrect and unacceptable, we tried speaking with her and showing her what to do regarding the issues she had with learning the company's and clients' processes. When she was confronted, she would accept what we had told her. However, she would eventually slip back into her old behavior and would make the rest of us suspicious of her. She made our working environment unstable and insecure, but she would get candidates hired for jobs on her assigned positions, so management didn't say anything or do anything about the situation. Needless to say, she's not a very popular member of the team, and it's due to her behavior, which is the same behavior that James is warning us about in this verse. We see that the world's wisdom is not for our benefit because this wisdom is not from God, but is from the devil. It is earthly and unspiritual, and it brings chaos and wickedness, which are the products of living in envy and selfishness. Living in humility will bring godly wisdom, but living for yourself will bring false wisdom. Don't be fooled by the world's messages of living only for yourself and never being satisfied because someone else has something you want. This is false wisdom, which looks to harm others. Instead, strive for true wisdom, which seeks to build up others and spread peace. The third point I'd like to bring up is that the wisdom from heaven is beneficial, and this is found in James 3:17 through 18. The wisdom from heaven edifies others in peace and harmony. True wisdom is displayed not from prideful living, but from living in humility. As mentioned earlier in James 3:13, wisdom is shown through actions that arise from a life of humility. James provides us an examination in James 3:17 of some additional aspects of what the wisdom from heaven looks like. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. True wisdom is shown to be undefiled and seeks to spread peace. In comparison to the world's wisdom, a person with true wisdom doesn't need to get their own way all the time, but is willing to focus on the needs and desires of others before their own needs and desires. Someone with true wisdom isn't looking to hold grudges or harm others by refusing to forgive them, because they're so full of mercy that there's no place in their life for holding grudges or harming others. Someone with true wisdom shows their wisdom by the works they produce, and someone with true wisdom treats others fairly, honestly, and with integrity. Although it has been argued that there is a direct connection between what James and Paul wrote regarding wisdom, this assertion should be treated with caution due to James writing before Paul, as well as uncertainty regarding the study of the Holy Spirit during James's time. One significant aspect of the wisdom from heaven is it begins in purity. It is undefiled, uncorrupted, has no blemishes or defects, and is not faulty in any way, shape, or form. Everything that follows purity in this verse shows a particular aspect of purity. Those with the wisdom from heaven will love peace, will be considerate of others, and will be submissive. Their actions show the purity of the wisdom from heaven in that they care more for the rights and condition of others more than they care about being right or getting their own way. Their lives will show the purity of the wisdom from heaven in that they are full of mercy and good fruit and don't seek to do things that harm others or produce selfishness. The purity of the wisdom from heaven is shown through their lives by being impartial and sincere in their decision-making and conduct. They can be relied upon to be trustworthy, honest, and willing to do what is right. The Greek word here used for impartial, adiakritos, can also mean without doubt, but is better understood in this context as being without more than one allegiance, and that it ties in better with the Greek word for sincere, anupokritos, used in this verse. Our allegiance must be completely focused to God. We can't have any other allegiances that will take our minds and hearts away from serving God. If we have any other allegiance that overtakes our allegiance to God, we are not showing true wisdom. So let's make sure that nothing in our lives comes before God so that we can live our lives full of the wisdom from heaven. Another way that the wisdom from heaven is beneficial is that peaceful actions will produce righteous results. James tells us in James 3:18 that peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. What we do in our lives can either lead to the spread of good or bad things. If we choose to do evil or wicked things, we will see evil or wicked things grow and spread, and the same pattern follows for doing good things. If you do good, you will see goodness spread all around you. Although some may view the phrase harvest of righteousness as fruit that comes from righteousness, the context of the verse seems to suggest that righteousness itself is the fruit being described here. These righteous results that come from peaceful actions are from those who are peaceful. If we do what is right, others will see what we're doing and want to imitate our actions or at least change their behavior. A personal illustration I'd like to share regarding this truth comes from one of my former jobs, where I was working as a residential care specialist to rehabilitate teenage sex offenders. On a day I was working there, one of the residents had been acting up and was sent to the BMR, the Behavioral Modification Room, to calm down. I was asked by my supervisor to watch the resident while the resident was in the BMR, so I grabbed a chair and sat over by the BMR. The resident saw me coming and was not happy to see me. He told me repeatedly to go away and tried multiple times to push my chair in order to provoke me, but I remained calm and was at peace. The resident eventually got tired of trying to provoke me and was able to do his time quietly in the BMR. After that incident, this particular resident was noticeably happier around me, didn't try to provoke me again. He got along better with the other residents and had a better overall attitude. I believe that the wisdom from heaven was in me that day. It certainly didn't come from my own strength or wisdom. If I had acted according to the world's wisdom, I would have told off the resident and perhaps even tried to physically stop the resident from pushing my chair. These actions would have led to a physical and or verbal confrontation with the resident, which could have resulted in myself or the resident, or other staff coming to my aid, being injured. I may have been possibly fired. The resident would have still been in a bad mood and possibly caused others to be irritated and cause trouble as well. If we live in peace, peace will spread and righteousness will grow. In comparison to the world's wisdom, the wisdom from heaven is beneficial in that it edifies others in peace and harmony. It begins in purity. Peaceful actions will produce righteous results, and righteous results that come from peaceful actions are from those who are peaceful. Seek true wisdom by showing that you care for others, as well as being peaceful and doing peaceful actions. If you do these things, you will show others and yourself that you are wise, and righteousness will spread because true wisdom seeks to build up others and spread peace, while false wisdom looks to harm others. Being wise in God's sight is much different from being wise according to the world's standards. True wisdom, the wisdom from heaven, benefits others and seeks to spread righteousness, while the world's wisdom is harmful in that it seeks only to satisfy the self-centeredness of those who practice it. If you want to be truly wise, don't seek your own glory, but seek to glorify God by living in humility before Him. Since we're living in a sinful world, living according to God's standards of wisdom won't be easy. We may experience frustration when we see others who live for themselves succeed in this world, while we struggle to compete or even survive in this world. But thankfully, God is able to provide for everything we need, including true wisdom. When we're in a situation of need, let's obey what Jesus said about glorifying God in Matthew 6:33, when He said, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." We've seen earlier that God will provide us wisdom in James 1:5, so let's cry out to Him for wisdom when we're lacking in wisdom. Let's be wise and spread righteousness wherever we are and in all that we do. Amen.